Thank you for attending. I can't see how many people we have, and I'm trying to manage a number of different windows here. My name is John Bickar. I am Senior Web Developer and DevOps Lead with Stanford Web Services. We are the central web shop for the university. We manage over 2,600 websites, almost exclusively on the Acquia platform, although we have some on other platforms as well. So I am, as my colleague Marvin Kirkendall once put it, he said that I am responsible for the health of the service. So I'm charged with making sure that the websites that we run are secure, stable, performant, and scalable. This session is a little bit of crowdsourcing. So this is not, this is me polling all of you to get your good ideas. I've been charged as part of my personal development goals for this year is to really develop my vision and strategy for the next 3 years for DevOps within web services. And so this is a little bit of a meta session in terms of I'm going to present my strategy, but I also want to talk about the process of developing one. And it's new for me, and part of it is just getting it out there and getting your ideas out there and getting feedback. So this is me getting my ideas out there and getting feedback from all of you, because if I've learned one thing, it's that the intelligence of the people that surround me is much greater than my own. So I would like to have a little popcorn icebreaker here just to get people participating. Research shows that if you contribute in a meeting or a session early, that you're more engaged. So one of my favorite icebreakers is what's your favorite breakfast? And we did this at a meeting not long ago, and everybody walked out being super hungry. So you're probably going to be hungry at the end of the session. So if you need to go get something to eat, you are welcome to obey the law of 2 feet. And I'll kick it off, and then I'll let Jean-Francois, I guess, manage it with people raising their hands within the Zoom chat. But my favorite breakfast, definitely Eggs Benedict, and I will admit that I would like a Bloody Mary on the side with my Eggs Benedict.
Anybody else?
And
get coffee from James Smith.
Definitely agree with the Bloody Mary and Eggs Benedict. It's very good.
Yogurt parfait from Jia Chen.
Okay, smoked trout and scrambled eggs.
Ooh, that's a good call.
I'm gonna go with cappuccino and multigrain croissant, fresh baked.
French toast, boba tea, good old fashioned scramble, hash with sausage. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be hungry after this. French omelet and toast, food. Ian, the chef in our group, says smoked salmon with capers or breakfast burrito. I've only seen Ian's dishes. I have not been able to taste them yet, but what I've seen is drool worthy. Coconut water and powdered vegetables, chocolate, banana, peanut butter, then coffee. My daughter yesterday said that she wanted 15 bananas for breakfast. And then she said she wanted 1,500 bananas. And somewhere we lost the scale. James says he wants the breakfast buffet. Awesome. All right, thank you everyone for that. I've got, and please feel free to continue popping your breakfast ideas in here. I've got a couple kind of meta points that I want to talk about in terms of, there we go, too many windows. In terms of developing a strategy, then I'm going to throw my strategy out there for you, and then we're going to talk after that, and I'd love to get your feedback on what my actual DevOps strategy is. So this is, like I said, this is not just DevOpsy. It's about developing a vision and strategy, but the context is within DevOps. So the first thing that I want to talk about is Go Ugly Early. And those of you who are country music fans may be familiar with this song. Get your ideas, the thought is get your ideas out there, get feedback, get people talking about them. Oh, nothing, there we go. The second one is be bold. And that's one of the principles that our CIO stands on and within university IT. So be bold, make a stand, to have an opinion, have a stance. With that, accept feedback. So when you get feedback on your bold ideas, be ready to act upon it, be ready to change. And that said, while you're accepting, although you're accepting feedback, stick to your principles. So this strategy and vision that I'm about to share with you, I've presented it. This is the third time that I've actually presented it, and some of the ideas were actually pretty controversial, and I got some pushback on it. And we'll talk about the very specific one that seems that I've had some people tell me that's not possible, but I really believe that it's. I really believe that it's something that is core to what we should be doing. So I'm going to switch to a different deck. While I'm switching over, does anyone have any questions so far or any feedback? All right, not seeing anything. Shay asks, did you make ugly quotes for that slide on purpose? I'm a developer, and I was elected to lead, not read. So I'm not a designer. So I worked with my director, Sarah Worrell-Berg. She's the director of Stanford Web Services. I worked with her starting in the fall to develop this DevOps vision, strategy, and roadmap for the next 3 years. I presented it to my team. I presented it at the Stanford University IT Unconference in the fall. This is something that I'm continuing to refine and I'm continuing to operationalize. So I'm making it living and breathing. And part of it is, so going back to developing a vision and strategy, getting yourself out there and talking about it as much as possible. So yes, I did say 2023. So what do we do at this university? We're preparing students for leadership in a complex world. And man, is that world getting more complex by the minute, if the past 2 weeks have shown anyone. The work that our Stanford community does, it matters, and it has a positive impact on the world. And we, in our team, we have a responsibility to support and communicate that work. We never know when it might be needed. And man, again, has that been really underscored in the last 2 weeks, last month. Our job is to support our partners and know their business and deliver cutting edge communications. And I think that the Teach Anywhere website has been a wonderful example of that. We had no idea that that was gonna be built on our service. We had no idea that it was gonna blow up so fast within its importance for the university. And we were ready and able to support it. Mute for just a second. I'm gonna try not to clear my throat into the microphone. So the websites and services that we support, they need to be available, reliable, they need to be trustworthy, 24/7, 365. And as our service has grown to more and more sites and more important sites, it's become more and more critical. Dedicated to solutions to finding big challenges. I'm sorry. This is my first time doing this, so I appreciate you fumbling around. I normally am able to do this and be a little funnier, but it's also hard to tell whether people are laughing at your jokes when you can't hear any of the background.
Go girl, go, go,
go girl, go, exactly.
Go, go,
go. All right, so the things that these are the bullet points that I drill into every time that I talk about what we do. Our websites need to be secure. They need to conform to minimum security requirements, and we have security as a design principle. They need to be stable. We need defined uptime metrics for planned and unplanned downtimes. We need to report on those metrics. We need to talk about those metrics. We need to have defined page load targets for anonymous and authenticated user roles. And then we also need to have our services be scalable. We need to have them be horizontally scalable in that we can support thousands of websites, and we need to be vertically scalable in that we can support a ton of traffic on any given one. Now, we're not Netflix in the age of COVID-19. We're not having to do that scalability, but I was just having a conversation that the Office of Special Events and Protocol is talking to us, is asking us for support on hosting Stanford's commencement online because they're not having traditional commencement. And they have done live streams in the past, but that's kind of the age that we live in. So that's the scale that we need to look at. So how do we do that? How do we get there? How do we achieve those standards and give our clients and our community the best software possible? By using memes, clearly. So the thing that we do is that we use memes. So we're going to DevOps all the things. So what does DevOps mean, right? Wikipedia, which is the singular canonical source of truth, right? Gives us this definition.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Irina. It gives us this definition. I presume everybody can read this. It's a set of practices. I'm not going to read it straight off the slide. This definition is good enough for me in terms of what DevOps is. And largely, I want to get the ops out. I want to get the ops part out of the way of our developers. We've got, I believe, 6 developers on our team, and we're hiring, by the way. I want to get the ops out of the way of the devs and allow them to deliver high quality software without worrying about whether or not the website is up or secure, performant, scalable, etc. So how do we do that? Our principles. Data-driven decision-making. We want every decision that we make to be backed up by the numbers. We want to automate things, but we want to automate with purpose. We want our people to be creative. And I'm going to go into each of these in more depth. Lifecycle management, making sure that there's a defined start and end date for everything. And this last one is the one that proved to be most controversial when I talked about this at the IT Unconference. So I'm really going to dig into this, and I'm happy to have anybody interrupt me at any point here. So the data-driven decision-making. This quote about the needed business outcomes, this comes from Gartner. Gartner's got a great series of white papers on DevOps, and I really like this particular quote. We want to figure out what we want to achieve and then work backwards from there to determine what we should measure. Use our numbers, use our metrics to determine whether or not we're meeting our goals, and then develop a plan to meet or exceed those. In terms of automation, we want to have humans do what humans are good at. Analyze information, make decisions, be creative. There was a great series that I just read yesterday. I don't know how many people read The Oatmeal by Matthew Inman. It's a series of web comics, but he has got a great series on creativity, and it really spoke to me because it's tough when we're all in quarantine and we're juggling and battling a number of different fires. It's a great chance and great opportunity to step back and look at what makes creativity. But have the computers do what the computers are good at, the detailed repetitive tasks. And I've got a number of really, really talented people on our team that have done a ton of work in this area this year. And I particularly want to call out Mike Decker, if he's on. I can't see who all's on, and Ian Monroe, and of course Shay. But they've really done a ton of work in this area and freed up a lot of space for creativity. Lifecycle management. Are you coming in? Oh, we're going to have a special guest here. My daughter, Natalie, aspiring DevOps engineer. One of the things that we've learned in the age of COVID is that do not apologize for being interrupted by children, pets, anyone else. Lifecycle management. Everything that gets created has an expiration date. So every website, every module, every tool. This ties into the initiatives of University IT, which are renew, extend, replace. So don't keep hanging on to the old systems. Don't keep fighting the same dumpster fires. We get to create new and interesting dumpster fires. Finally, no on call. So I started thinking about this vision and this strategy, and I realized that I have a responsibility to all of my teammates. And we are, I should emphasize, we are a web application development shop. And we develop applications. We're not an infrastructure shop. So this is why I think perhaps this was controversial to some people who are infrastructure people. But I do not believe that we should have the need to have any team member be on call 24/7. No web developer should have on-call rotation, nights and weekends duty in his or her job description. So our systems and our processes and our practices need to be monitored, they need to be documented, they need to be redundant, they need to be knowable, and they need to be self-healing. This puts us in a position that we can have the teams that are responsible for making these systems stay up 24/7, it puts them in a position where they have the information that they need. So we have the IT Operations Center, which is a 24/7 shop, and they do a great job. And we also have Acquia's global support team, which they run our infrastructure. So they should have all the tools that they need in order to have my developers and myself not be on call. That said, there's a lot that goes into this, right? There are always edge cases. And one of the things is that I've learned in working on this, I've been pushing this no on call for a while. So one of them is document when you've got an edge case, something that does require somebody to be on call, document that obsessively. Additionally, there's always edge cases that are opt-in that can be foreseen. So allow people to opt in for the edge cases. When commencement is coming up or family weekend, say, hey, we need somebody to be around, and keeping an eye on things this weekend. Who can do it? And that starts to build trust within. It starts to build trust within your team because you're giving them the heads up. You're not making them be on call. You're not waking them up. And when people have the opportunity to opt in and be a participant, it's a lot better than saying, hey, you're on call this weekend, you wear the pager, it sucks to be you. So in terms of obsessively documenting these edge cases, I refer back to a quote that Ian Monroe said one time. He said, it's like trying to flatten out a lot of tinfoil. The more effort you spend hammering out the wrinkles, the smoother going it'll be later. So in terms of building trust, take the routine on-call rotations. So I've been trying as much as I can, and I hope my other devs that are on here, I've been trying as much as I can to say, hey, I'm around this weekend, I'll take it. And I'm taking that burden on myself. We've improved our automation and our monitoring and our self-healing so much that it's not that big of a burden to me, but it's building the trust within them that if I do have to ask somebody, which occasionally I do, to keep an eye on things, that they're more willing to do it. And I would love to hear feedback from the dev team on that one. And then when you do ask for help, ensure that it's within a defined scope and duration. So don't just say, here's the pager, sucks to be you. It's, okay, I'm going to be out, I'm going to be at a competition this weekend, or Shay saying, hey, I'm going to be running in the woods for 70 miles. So I'm not going to have my phone on me for most of the day on Saturday. Can somebody watch the alerts and keep an eye on things?
So can we talk about no on call for a minute?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, Skippy.
So I'm a hardware guy, and I'm very used to this sort of mentality. In the DevOps model, you're worried about the software getting stuck in a loop and having somebody go in, as a simple example that I understand, because I'm a hardware guy. You're worried about, the site getting stuck in a loop and not responding and having some way to break that loop, that kind of thing. That's the mentality here, what the problem is, problem case, for example.
Could be anything. It could be the website is down. It could be that, so you're getting 500 errors. It could be that it could be that people can't log in, they can't authenticate. It could be that, so one of the things that we've seen is that we've got really complex caching layers. It could be that some things are either the cache is not being invalidated or the cache is being invalidated
Dirty cache
too
not
quickly.
flushing.
Yes, yep. So it could be a number of different things.
Okay, but you're not worried about hardware layer, classic hardware layer problems of node down in cluster or any of that kind of stuff, because that is on the ops guys side of the world.
Yeah, that's on the infrastructure team. So we are, Acquia is they're a platform as a service provider, so they're a cloud provider. So we're really my team is only concerned about the application layer, or we're really only responsible for that.
Right. So I'm just trying to think of in the coding phase, then when you're coding to look for things like, cache is not flushing, you have a alert that comes out to that. You build a routine to fix the cache rather than have the alert come out and go to a person to go do it then.
Yes. Oh, and is Greg on here? We had some really, Greg, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
we have some skeletons in our closet. You want to talk about that one a little bit, Greg, and just talk about how we've improved things?
Well, we used to use this service called Pingdom, and I think it was my second day here. I've been here for about 3.5 years, and this cache problem was happening on a couple sites, and we couldn't figure out why the cache was getting poisoned, and the only cure was to really clear the cache. And so I put a Pingdom webhook in that checked every minute if the site was up. And then if it didn't, I added a hook to our application that would tell it to clear the cache by passing an argument. And that kept that site up for the better part of 3 years till we moved to this new service.
It was like a little dipper bird that whenever the dipper bird, have you seen the ones that's like something about the CD-ROM tray pops out and like reboots the computer? It was basically that. It was a dipper bird. It was a dipper bird that rebooted cleared out the cache. So we try to, speaking of documenting edge cases, so we try to document those things and not rely on those janky solutions.
Okay, yeah, because I do host a 24/7 app. I mean, I've got developers and all that other stuff now in my current role, so it's like, okay, thank you.
Sure. Anybody else? There's a lot of chat in the chat window. I will read through that in a moment.
I do have a questions from someone way back on the first slides, asking about, I'm sorry, I lost that question. I'll be right with you. Sorry, you go on, John. I lost that question. Oh, I'm sorry, I got it now. So how do you go about suggesting vision early on in the process, i.e. before earning cloud?
Say that again?
How do you go about suggesting vision early on in the process? You were talking about vision.
Yeah. I'm fortunate that our leadership within our organization really pushes it, and they talk about as you move into more leadership roles. I started as a developer. I was the only developer on web services, and now we've grown. I was the second employee, and we've grown to we're now 20 people. So I've grown into a leadership role, and my director Sarah, she pushes vision and strategy. Her executive director, Kim, pushes vision and strategy all the way up to our CIO, just really talking about vision and strategy. So we've got a lot of support for it, and not just support, it's that it drives what we do in our day-to-day work. Hello.
So basically, you're meaning to say that it's you need management support to gain that cloud in collaboration with your upper management, and
Yes, yes and no.
buy-in. Okay.
There's also a bit of lead from wherever you are, and so
Okay.
you can, and
Yes.
that's kind of what I wanna talk about here and get feedback is that you don't have to be in you don't have to have be a manager and have people reporting to you in order to build a vision and a strategy. It could be
Okay.
you don't have to support 2,600 websites. You can build your vision and strategy and stand from wherever you are.
So it's almost dependent on the team's personality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's it depends on your own personality as well.
Okay.
Other questions out there? All right, I'm gonna hop into what our roadmap looks like because this is kind of fun. When I developed this in the fall of 2019, I did not foresee exactly what might be coming. So my plan for 2020 was document the current state. Let me make sure I got my notes here. Document our gaps, build the plan. And I don't know how many people have ever seen Office Space, but if you've ever seen this little throwaway sight gag in Office Space when they're in the room with the Bobs, planning to plan. So build your plan to plan. Your best laid plans are going to help you identify priorities. They're going to help you determine the metrics to track. But oh wait, sometimes even your best laid plans get trampled all over. So we've had some things get thrown out the window. This is kind of what I was looking at was, so that was supposed to be 2020. And I was like, okay, then 2021 maybe will be lifecycle automation, and 2022 would be lifecycle management, and 2023 would be no on call. Or, we'd switch it up. 2021 would be automation, 2022 would be no on call, 2023 would be lifecycle management, or this, flip them around. Or what really happened is, 3 months into the year, 2020, we got tons of automation. And again, thanks to Mike and Ian for all the work that they've done. We're really moving a lot towards no on call because of a lot of that. And then, of course, I have a typo in my slide, COVID-19. Just pretend that says COVID-19. So I want to open this up to people again on the call and ask kind of what are your DevOps priorities for the next few years? What are the challenges that you're facing, and how are you structuring your teams? And then I also want to open it up for feedback on what do you think about this vision? What do you think about developing a vision and a strategy? How are you developing your own vision and strategy? So this is the participatory part, and at this point I can scroll through the chat. Bijoy says he's got a 4-year-old on call if Natalie needs somebody to talk to. Do you want to talk to Nakash? Okay, maybe later. Oh, yes, Zach, exactly. That's Mike Tyson. Everyone has, I love that quote. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And it's the corollary is Murphy's Law, which is no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. So be flexible. Chaz says, actually a client trying to get a better understanding of our dev situation. This is helpful. Tell me more, Chaz, if you're on. Let me see. Do I need to unmute you? If you want to chime in here, Chaz, I just unmuted you if you want to talk more about that. And if you don't, that's fine too.
So in lifecycle management, How are you dealing with retaining old code in case you need to roll back, kind of roll forward, roll back? If you're running all the time, we're pushing out new code to our environment as we go, and then the fur hits the fan. What's your rollback look like?
So we just from a very just baseline rudimentary DNA level. I mean, we rely heavily on version control software, Git specifically, and it is built into every bit of our workflow. So we do it to review code. We do it to then that also enables us to roll back things if we need to. Where it gets a little bit more hairy is if we introduce changes, and it does happen if we or the software platforms that we rely on, because we largely run on an open source software package called Drupal, which some of the people on the call may be familiar with, and some of the people on the call are very familiar with. What gets a little bit more hairy is if we introduce database schema changes, because those are tougher to roll back than the code is. So we try to be very, very careful when we do that. But sometimes you need to fix forked database schema updates.
We've got, I'll chime in a little bit and support you, John. We've got a really rigorous process of testing. So, we do the dev stage prod type of workflow. We've got a series of automated tests that we run, like John was saying. And we practice build artifacts. So everything we have is basically a ball of code, and we know exactly what that is as we move it along. And we hit it with our tests. Any bugs we get, we automatically write a test for. Any regressions should get caught early. So when we get to production, the likelihood of having to roll back is low. If we do have to roll back, everything's tagged, everything's backed up, everything is put into state where we can. And hopefully we never have to do that. That's the holy grail. But if we do, we know previous states of everything before we do any sort of live code pushes or database changes. So all the databases are backed up prior to any schema updates. All the code has a previous version. So it's very stateful in that matter, and it can be reverted back. It takes time, so we want to be very careful not to do that. But everything is explicitly managed, named, tagged, and moved very purposefully.
Yeah, Rob and Sean asked, how do you roll back database updates on Acquia? You kind of don't. You have to write the code that resolves it. And so just to speak to what Shay was talking about, we have really, and with his leadership, we've really developed a much more complex ecosystem of how we build things. I made a joke with the devs the other day. I wanted to add, in our new Drupal 8 product, I wanted to add one module. It was a one-line change of code. It was one line in a composer.json file. And that entire pull request ended up being like probably 20 different files, because I had to add the test. I had to add I actually had to add a couple of different tests. I had to do some back and forth and talking about it. And it was like, whereas previously, and if you're just managing one website, Drupal 6, you're like, okay, drush.dl this module and you're good to go. The way that we protect against those having to roll back those database updates is just having a lot more coverage in everything that we do. Sorry, Skippy, I cut you off.
It's similar to my flow. I've got dev stage prod. I host a distance learning app, among other things, in my environment. And that 24/7 test escape gets out there. We push the code out, and we don't find out until midway through a class on Tuesday. Oh damn! Now what do you do? Kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a thorny problem when you've got users expecting to use your service, and all of a sudden you've got to fix it.
And it's thorny when you don't know exactly how they're using it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the comment about not hitting it all looks good until you hit battle is exactly right. Your test plan may not cover everything a user's going to do, because users are not predictable beasts.
They're not predictable.
So
And when, so that's another thing that we really try to do is whenever we discover a bug, whether we introduce it or not, we write a regression test for it. And so that again is something, that's why the one line of code that I tried to add one module took so long, because we hit some bugs and then I had to integrate some other things. So Chaz says that now he's ready to ask his questions. So I'm going to go unmute him if you want to jump in, Chaz.
Yeah, you asked me to speak to my being here as a client, to be trying to learn more about our developer side of things. And the thing is, as a client, I need to have certain expectations of what's being done, but I don't necessarily understand all the nuts and bolts behind it. I have to trust, for instance, that you are working on things to make the jobs easier for yourself to be able to do a good job. This is giving me a good picture of what goes into that. So thank you.
That's great feedback. Thank you. And that's something that we talk about a lot in our team, is that we need to be able to defend the processes that we use in order to be able to support the things that we build. And because we're here, and I don't know, Chaz, I'm not sure if you're at Stanford or not, but we have a responsibility to the university and to our clients. And one of the benefits that we bring to the university is that we're here, like we're not going anywhere, and we are part of the university. So the websites that we built for clients 8 or 9 years ago, granted, most of those we've upgraded, but we have websites that we built multiple years ago, and we are still supporting them. We are here, and as we go forward, we need to continue and be able to support these things. So thanks, I appreciate that feedback.
Thank you.
Vjoy asked, can you speak about creating a vision and plan in an academic environment where you have different classes of stakeholders who may have quick changing needs? Does that filter through at times and cause disruption? Oh boy, disruption in the age of COVID-19. Yeah, one of the things that that's really challenging about this, and Ian, if Ian's on, can't see if Ian's on or not, but one of the things that Ian and I have really been working on is, we're trying to push this forward. I'm trying to build this vision and strategy and get us to automate all the things and no on call. And man, fires come in, rolling bombs come in, and we're trying to work on this process improvement. And it's really like catch can. You do it when you've got time for it. But I think part of that is you just get part of that is getting the people into your team. And I know that it's a tough hiring environment right now. We've got a hiring freeze. So that's not necessarily the solution. Another part of it is just make the space and make it defensible. Kind of going back to what Chaz was asking about, is make the case that you spending time on this stuff is important, that yes, there's a fire you got to put out. Yes, there's another fire you got to put out. Yes, there's this rolling bomb. Yes, these are changing expectations, but there still needs to be space built into your plan and into your process to be able to work on stuff like this.
I think that it's also worth noting that every hour that you spend automating a process so that humans don't have to do it anymore pays you dividends in the long run. With hours and hours of time saved. So it's not like, working on processes that will keep your things running is a zero-sum game. You are increasing the amount of work that you can accomplish by taking out the rote stuff and making it a little bit more foolproof.
And that the Oatmeal Creativity Series talks about that, and how using your tools and focusing on sharpening your tools. And I think as human nature, we get bad at it because you just kind of suffer through processes and you're like, okay, this is what it is, but I just need to get this done, so I'm going to do it in this old janky way. And we don't often make the space to take the time to improve the process or to improve the automation that we have around it. Irina asked about what tools are you using for regression tests. Yeah, and then Shay answered, we do use unit testing in PHP unit and kernel, and BHAT, we're looking to move to Codeception. BHAT is, it's got its pluses and minuses. So, but we've been using that for at least 6 years. So it's old school. And yeah, he says we have used BHAT, Browser Stack, and AMP.
And Diffie.
And Diffie for visual regression. But visual regression testing is tough because you really have to define what is supposed to be changing and what's not supposed to be changing, and that's a tough one to do it's a tough one to do at scale on a ton of websites. If you've got one website, it's going to be a lot more effective.
John, can you talk a little bit about PHP unit testing?
Shay, can you talk a little bit about PHP unit testing?
What would you like to know? With our PHP unit tests, what do you want to know?
I think my question is more about, I think I'm asking this question from the camp perspective. PHP unit seems to be becoming a very common tool. I think it gained much more popularity than BHAT or any other testing tools that I've seen before. And because this camp is for community by community, so community can get up to speed on tools that they need, I'm kind of trying to figure out, this is like underlying motivation for my question.
Okay.
Do we want our community to have more exposure, maybe some training, maybe some kind of things that would allow people from community to do more testing? Because once these PHP unit tests are ready, lots of people, I'm sure, would be happy to volunteer to actually do testing, to take a little bit load off your team. Writing them probably is more complicated, but testing something that we can crowdsource for certain things.
I'll kind of talk about our process and standards in this. And PHP unit testing is great. Unfortunately, it's hard to sell the value of because it takes time, a lot of effort. Like you end up writing a lot more code in the unit test than you do in the actual code itself a lot of times. And for that reason, I wrote unit tests in college and then probably went nearly 10 years of my career with hardly writing any before being able to get back into really starting to write them again. So it really, you need to sell it to, you really do need to sell the value of these things to your team, your superiors, your owners, your higher ups, whoever, because they work. My college professor was adamant that he would never deliver code without a test because he can't guarantee you that this thing's going to work without a test. So we have got process and practice where all of our custom written PHP code, this is primarily in our Drupal stuff, has to come with a unit test, and it has to have at least 90% coverage, period. No questions asked. You deliver anything to our main development branches, you have to have 90% coverage. And that ensures that things are going to work. The things that we will catch those errors before they get into production. We don't get into that problem where it's 3 weeks later we find a bug and then have to figure out how to revert things or redeploy or manage it. So getting up ahead of these things saves you time in the long run, but it's an upfront investment. It does take time to learn. It does take time to do. They do take time to manage. So we have all these things automated and ran, so we're not running them all manually. Everything that gets sent in, the pull request gets run through Circle CI and run through PHP unit tests, which is great because you can automate these things. That's really, really important. Automate your unit tests. You don't want to have to manually remember to run them and check them and things. Just have them running all the time. Make it a part of your process and enforce it. So you will constantly catch stuff as you do it, as you introduce bugs. You can refactor things with confidence that's amazing. If you've got unit tests, you can leave those alone, completely upend the code, and then run the test and everything passed. You know it works still. That's amazing. And anytime you do have a bug, you can add a test to them. So unit tests are pretty quick to run, but they take a little bit to write, and they can be automated. So they're pretty cool.
Yeah, and the PHP unit tests serve a little bit different purpose than our BHAT or our functional and regression tests do. And like I said, BHAT, we're looking to move to codeception. So the unit tests are really just like asserting that like this piece of code, this little tiny chunk of code does what it's supposed to. Like Shay says, really quick to run. The BHAT tests are more like when I go to this page and I enter this for this form and I, attach this image and I click submit, then I get this expected result. So they're sisters and brothers that hang out with each other. Yeah, Carol's giving me a time check. I was noticing that as well. So we are about at time, and I want to give people a chance to get a bio break before the next session. But I am happy to hang out a little bit for anybody that wants to. But I'll make the official call right now. Thank you all very much for your feedback. Thanks. Oh, Skippy left. All right.
John, any lessons learned on presenting today?
Any lessons learned on presenting? Wow, yeah. It is. I've never done a presentation like this on Zoom, so it.
Really? That's surprising.
It's.
Shay,
What'd you say?
Just
it was
because
surprising?
you have.
Yeah, I guess when the in-house guy, you're always standing in front of a whiteboard, in front of a table or something. Right?
Yeah, it's different. Trying to find the windows. I mean, I'm glad that I hope that I didn't inadvertently share anything that I shouldn't have. I hope that I was only sharing the one blank desktop that had the world is your Drupal module background.
It went great.
All right, so one of my concerns with Zoom is that as soon as you close the Zoom,
you might end the meeting for all, but that's okay.
Well, you lose
but you
the
can
chat
leave.
too.
Do we want to have open it up, unmute everybody for a couple minutes for just
Yes,
chat?
sure. I believe, John, the chat will be saved as well.
Oh, the chat gets saved. Okay, good. Yeah, because it's being recorded. Okay,
yes.
Cool.
Yeah, it might get transcribed too.
I think people can unmute themselves.
They should be able to, yes.
Yeah, okay. So if anybody's got any questions while we're in here.
Popcorn style.
Unmute
Anybody
yourself.
have anything they want to say?
Angela's in the other room with Natalie.
I think we're all shy.
All right.
A different world, isn't it?
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Okay, so James, actually missed a couple of James's questions in here. What were your planning lessons learned? And he had asked earlier, what do you learn from your retrospects, and how you adjust the expectations for the next iteration of your plans. I think that a lot of it is just that we have and we constantly work on it. We've got a cycle of iterating and feedback loops and introspection. And so we ask tough questions and we say, does this process work? Is it working for us? Are these the right goals? And so we're constantly questioning and we're constantly looking at what our objectives are and saying, are the things that we're doing are actually getting us there, and does this work for people? And I go back to saying that, what I said earlier, that we've got a responsibility. I have a responsibility to my teammates as a DevOps person, that the operations don't just completely bowl them over. Rachel is raising her hand. So go ahead and jump in.
Hi, I guess I'm just wondering, it sounds like you have a great team and willing to collaborate and willing to look at how processes can be improved. I'm just wondering, when we're kind of siloed and organizationally in a space where that's not really the way things work, where it's more of this is the process in place and kind of fall in line type of thing, what do you do with that? Especially if your personality lends itself towards, I would really like to fix the underlying problem here.
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? I think Shay and I are both given the like,
Yeah. Well, I'll let you think. I'll stall for you a little bit.
Okay.
So I've been in that position. I come from agency work where it was fast and cheap all the time. There was no ability to sort of reflect on your processes of practice. You need to get it done, and it was just one fire to the next kind of thing. So to do that, you really need to push for the change a lot and constantly. If you want to see the change, you got to ask for it, and you got to ask for it often. Keep reminding the person that this is important, and really find the data and the value behind it. If you can sell the person on the values and show them with real scenarios, real things where you've been like, hey, if we had something here, it would have saved us X amount of time there. But you got to work at it for a while. Unfortunately, if you're in a position where the value isn't being seen yet.
And it's also, to be a little bit cynical about it, there's also the never let a crisis go to waste mentality. Whereas when something happens, when there's a dumpster fire, you can look back and say, hey, if we had done what I said and what I was advocating for, we wouldn't have this dumpster fire. Or we have this dumpster fire, and you know what will prevent this type of dumpster fire in the future? These process improvements. So
Gotcha.
it's tough.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Sure. All right, I definitely need a bio break before the next session, so I am literally going to call it, or at least I'm going to drop out.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, everybody.